It's 12:30. So thank you everyone for joining us on this call, and I appreciate everybody taking time out for this great session on digitalization of the finance function. This is definitely need of the time, and of course, this is something that is possibly driven a lot more by the COVID-19, and everybody is pushed towards, even whether we like it or not, we are pushed towards going digital. Now, today we have been joined by an amazing team of speakers. We have Taha, who is PwC Director, and he's been advising clients around areas of financial reporting and utilizing digital as the lever to report smarter. He's a fellow UAE MAC member as well, Members Advisory Committee member, and we are also joined by our good friend, Kevin, who has been a member since 2003, and he's worked in Ireland and Australia, and now he is sitting in Singapore. So currently he's the Managing Director of Asia for Xero, $20 billion listed cloud accounting technology company. So we have a great panel of speakers. Before we start off, and before I hand it over to Kevin, I just would like to thank everybody who has joined us on this call, and especially SIMFOTIX, Kazi Wakas, who has organized this session for us. So it is as part of our initiative of Super Connected Community. We are driving these sessions on a monthly basis, and we are trying to make sure that we are updating everyone on the recent or the most hot topics that are going around, and hopefully we will continue with this session every month. We are planning the next session on 12th of Jan, and then following in 9th of Feb. So hopefully we will give you more finer details as we go through the calendar. But here I would like to sort of pass on to Kevin now, and Kevin can help us with understanding a little bit more about digital, as well as giving a brief about himself, because my introduction, I'm sure, doesn't do justice to his experience.
Thank you very much for
Over to you, Kevin.
Kind introduction. Hello, everybody. It's good to see some of you, and hopefully you can all hear me well. Yeah, my name is Kevin Fitzgerald, and I'm originally from Ireland, and I've been an ACCA student since 1999 and a full member since 2003. So I've been in the industry for I guess over 20 years, and my career started working in a small to medium accounting practice that served SMEs up to about 250 staff of clients that we would look after, and really my career has gone from that style of accounting into audit, where I worked with KPMG, to financial reporting in hedge funds for a long time. And then I moved to Australia, where I actually moved into recruitment and helped accountants actually understand what were their options in their career, helped them connect with financial services businesses throughout Australia. And I then stumbled upon a business called Xero, which was advertising everywhere in Australia at the time, and they're actually a New Zealand business originally, and I got the opportunity to join back in 2015 to lead sales and partnerships in Australia, and it just really took off so quickly in Australia, to the point now where I think 75% of SMEs in Australia use cloud accounting. It's the most heavily adopted country across technology for SMEs and the accounting firms. I've been in Singapore for just over 3 years, so my role is currently as Managing Director of Asia, which covers a big part of geography, but I would say a lot of our focus is Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia for now, where we're seeing a real fast uptake by accountants on choosing and making the easy decision to learn more about cloud technology. They're very kind of the guys that invite me along today, and hopefully I can share some of my learnings of 20 years in the industry. And one thing I would say is that I still find accounting firms are doing the same stuff that they did 20 years ago when I worked in a firm. So we still are early in the journey. So we're here to help educate and help people understand what choices they have.
Thank you, Kevin. And I will obviously, as part of our session, we would obviously like to know how how from your journey from an accountant to a tech business leader, how you have sort of evolved in this journey, and what is the sort of personal upskilling mindset that that you have, and what you would like to share with the team.
Yeah, sure. I think if you think about our industry, the industry of accounting, and maybe if you drew a line on the page from 1950 to 2020, and really mark down what's changed, like what really has changed in the industry, and the majority of change is generally regulation. And in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we started to have desktop accounting and talk about paperless office. But since then, there's not really been such a big event the way that cloud accounting has had an impact. And for me, I think having that mindset of being really open and curious around the technology that's available, because I think it's actually full of surprises. And that's the one thing I get from accountants that I work with, is they don't actually realize the power of the technology that's available. And they have a perception that, implementing a piece of technology for one of their clients or for their own firm could actually cost, tens of thousands, maybe $100,000. That's not the case anymore. And that's really not just in cloud accounting. That's in a lot of technology services that we see nowadays. With the advent of SaaS, or software as a service, it's become a lot more affordable. And people kind of get suspicious when I tell them how affordable it is. You pay $40 a month per entity for cloud accounting with unlimited users, whereas previously you probably paid a lot more than that for a desktop CD or version that was a static piece of technology that didn't get developed. So there's really a moment of awakening when we look at our industry and say, okay, well, what's really been the big changes in the last 20 or 30 years? It's really been cloud accounting. And I think the industry is probably one of the last in terms of services to be disrupted. I think the legal industry is probably the one that will come next because of the complications in it. But accounting, in terms of professional services, is one that's really changing quickly.
Thank you for that. And then as part of our session, we are already receiving a lot of questions. So thank you everyone for sharing those questions. And Taha, if I may sort of come in at this point, if you want to sort of get into some of the details about your journey, as well as, of course, we are listening to Kevin, and Kevin is speaking from a digital transformation perspective. And what do you see from a customer perspective? Where do they stand in this picture?
Right. No, thanks, Naman. I mean, I think the first thing to probably mention there is that technology was always around us, and as Kevin was outlining, there's an advent of technology and a curve of how things have gone up in terms of, we started off with things like simple word processors to transitioning at some point to chunky ERPs that could do anything and everything for you, but they were, just big pieces of hardware sitting on your servers, and sometimes cumbersome as well. So as we've realized the benefits of moving to the cloud, having lean processes, etc., so have we also realized that technology can be used in better ways. You don't necessarily need to have everything on your plate, on your in-house server, but at the same time harnessing the benefits of a hybrid solution, right? So I think from that perspective, technology was always there. It still is relevant to all the work that we do. We use mobiles more and more. So I think where the advent of technology has gone is that it's trying to make it more accessible to everywhere. And I think that's a big feature, access anywhere, everywhere. So the use of mobile technology, for example, so many ERP providers are now thinking about how can they integrate mobile apps back to the ERP as an example, or how can they enable reporting dashboards to be available on mobile devices. That's one area where technology is changing a lot. And therefore, the learning, or perhaps the learning curve of people who are working in finance, needs to change around the same thing. They need to understand things around apps, APIs, how does the linkages work, what are areas that are good to go, what are areas that are not good to go, what technology provider to work with. And I think one of the biggest is the SME space, and I'm sure Kevin's got a lot of insight into that, because the competitive landscape that the big players had in the market is actually diminishing in many ways, because SMEs can now provide these services basically anywhere, at any place, anytime, through the use of technology. Services are much more, let's say, commoditized as opposed to what it was before, which was a face-to-face model. Now a lot of things happening virtually. So yeah, I would say that's where I see technology changing quite a lot from where we were maybe 5 years ago.
And okay, thank you, Taha, for that. And from a customer perspective, where do you see them standing as of now? Because I still get to hear, and I guess it will go back to Kevin as well, the same question, that when I speak with companies, they still are trying to assess, oh, shall we go for an ERP which is installed on their servers? Should we go for something which is on the cloud? Do you still have these conversations with companies? Do they still feel sort of afraid of being on the cloud? Is that something still happening? Taha, I'll go to you first, and then I'm pretty sure Kevin has a long list there, because he deals with a lot of SMEs.
Yeah. Perhaps I'll give a Middle East flavor to that answer, Noman, and then Kevin can provide whether that's global, that's a globally seen as well, or perhaps seen around in Southeast Asia and Australia as well. But I think in the Middle East, there is definitely a perception, a widely held perception around the fact that anything on the cloud is accessible to everyone. And people would often, you'd definitely have conversations in the finance world or even outside around trying to move everything in-house, right? I think that's just a security perception that will take time to go. And I'm sure globally as well, there's been a trend, a slope towards moving to the cloud, but I think everyone just started a bit sooner, I guess. But things like COVID is, for the Middle East, is a good wake-up call in terms of saying, I think in order to connect virtually, in order to have your workforce available at anywhere, anytime, you've got to have the right infrastructure, and the in-house infrastructure will struggle on that. And the cost of that in-house infrastructure are also relevant aspects. So I definitely see that changing. I think also another flavor on the Middle East side is that the likes of Amazon or Microsoft are realizing the size of the market, and they are setting up data centers regionally, not locally in every country, but regionally. Maybe that helps allay some of the fears, that entities have had about housing data in overseas locations, etc. So I personally see an uptake in the shorter term that will happen in the Middle East. But happy to hear what Kevin thinks about this in general.
Yeah, and I'd say you're right. Like, it is a common conversation. Like, should we stay on premise or go to the cloud? And really, where we try and help SMEs and their accounting firms understand and say, well, this is not really a decision about today. This is a decision about where you want your business to be in 3 to 5 years. So maybe if you delay and stay on premise today, it's an impending decision that will happen. And there's a few reasons for that. So we look at what's happened with COVID. That's really pushed people to think about having access on any device from anywhere at any time. And that gives people the flexibility to do the best work that they can. And if that continues for quite a long time, I think we're going to see digital acceleration, continue. Like you look at the likes of Zoom, Slack, Microsoft, really, really grown in that space. And a lot of it is because of the communication tools that people need to connect. But the work tools like cloud accounting, reporting, I saw a system recently that can consolidate in real time 75 entities in multi-currencies. Like the type of technology that's out there is really heavily convincing businesses to move away from on-premise heavy ERP. And it's really interesting around the data conversation, because I think people are apprehensive about their data and where it goes and where it can be seen. The important thing to remember is there is no technology business that would ever allow access to their systems for the use that it's not intended to be. So like ourselves, like we've got the highest grade security possible in the world. We're hosted on AWS. We actually think that we have as close to bank grade security or even better, because we have API connections from the banks, about 250 global banks, so all the big brand banks that you guys would know, that send daily transactions of their clients into Xero overnight every day for about 2.5 million SMEs. So if you think about the level of security and protection that we have to have, it's absolutely world class. I always kind of have a bit of a joke with SMEs and say, okay, you're talking about your business information and your fear of it being in the cloud. But if you have a smartphone, your whole personal life is in the cloud already. You've already made that journey. So what's the difference? And there are tools and procedures and processes that you can have in place. Like we have, security reviews and everybody's account, login, device access, everything like that. So it's about understanding how to protect yourself in the cloud rather than is cloud worse or scarier than what I currently have. So there's a bit of education needed in it as well.
Yeah, I would second Kevin on the last comment. I think we have a lot of data in the cloud already, personal data as well as corporate data as well. I mean, if you are signed up with a supplier who's already in the cloud and you've got your procurement profile set up with them, a lot of your information is in the cloud. Same with customers as well, where you might interact with the e-portal, etc. So yeah, I think there's perhaps a check to be done in terms of how much data you already have on the cloud. So, taking that step shouldn't be as difficult as people make it.
And I think it's something that's really important. So I get asked about cloud security all the time. The biggest failing and the biggest reason why people are open to, say, cyber attacks or ransomware is because somebody has a really terrible password. So none of us go out and leave the keys of our house in the front door or leave the keys in the car. We don't do that. Like it's really basic protection. And I see people that still have the most basic passwords, and that is so important to make sure that that's right. So we try and help educate SMEs and their accountants on password protection devices. What else can you use? Two-factor authentication. And also making sure that you do your due diligence on the company that you're choosing. A lot of SMEs are very cost focused and they tend to pick the cheapest cloud accounting software that's available. So they bypass all of the decision making around on-premise or cloud, and as soon as it comes to cost, they go to the cheapest. And that could be a real risk because they're picking maybe a platform that doesn't have the investment or security that's needed to protect them. But it always comes back to passwords. I still see it. People having really weak passwords, and maybe I can share. I use a system called LastPass, which I've got to have a 26-character password to get into the vault. That's basic stuff that we should all have now if you're operating in the cloud.
I agree with you, Kevin. I think that's one of the basic protection that we can play. I think it's one of the questions that was asked already by one of the members as well, because ransomware has been sort of a challenge as well. And now that we've talking about the security, and we have talked about the ERP and how we can change into the finance function into or transitioning into the digital finance. Why do you feel that it's important for accountants to come forward and have that digital mindset? Why is it so relevant for everyone these days? So probably I'll put that one for Taha, if you don't mind, Taha.
Yeah, no worries at all, Naman. I was wondering whether I should go first. But yeah, I think if I wanted to answer that in a very short and sweet way, I would say, digitization all comes down to data, because data is the base of reporting, data is the base of analysis, or any other, work that an accountant typically gets into. And with data moving into, more secure on-cloud digital format, as well as data being used in many manipulative ways to answer questions where it wasn't being used before. Now, I'll just talk about that in a minute. Accountants are very good with data. So naturally, accountants have a part to play in digitization of their organization. And I think they should take more of a responsibility of leading the change in their organization. So even beyond finance, whether it's their marketing team or whether it's their PR team, etc., there's a lot of digitization within an organization that's possible. And when you think about it, every function in the organization that handles data may not be very good at managing data, but accountants are, and therefore they can take that leading step in that organization to drive the digitization of data, and then drive the digitization of technology enablers or levers that will help harness the full power of the data. And what I mean by harnessing the full power of data is that in line with what's happening in industry, and we talk about Industry 4.0 a lot, these days, there's a shift in the role of every C-suite personnel, and more closer to accountants is the role of the CFO, which is now moving from a role of a compliance bearer or a processor of transactions and journal entries, etc. Now the CFO is looked upon as the true business partner, someone who will drive value by advising on what to do in the future, how to change strategy, what is the immediate financial impact, etc. So, and the only way that the CFO can do that is if he has the enablers and levers to report almost on a live basis or on a very quick basis what would change in different strategies from a sale perspective or a customer strategy perspective. What will that impact on the bottom line? How will that impact on customer retention? And all of this wonderful things can be done in the world of predictive analytics, as an example, or using AI to track customer trends, etc. And you could do that only once you understand the fundamentals of how these systems are brought up and how they interact with data, what is good data, what is bad data, etc. So to me, digitization of the finance function is about the changing role of the CFO, and the changing role of the CFO is about how are they managing data in a better way, and how are they using the right levers or technology enablers to harness the data for, let's say, better commercial use. So, I would put it out.
Yeah, that's really well said.
Taha.
Yeah. Maybe I could add to that. So if accountants are great financial historians, and so we kind of think about the future and have a good guess of what will happen in the next 3 to 5 years. A large majority of SMEs and their bigger, maybe medium-sized businesses will be on the cloud. So there's this situation that's going to happen, and if you think about an SME or a business at the moment, and if they were in the middle of a circle, who are they engaging with that's digitizing? So their customers want them to be digital, so they want to be able to pay them digitally. They want to have an online experience for products or services. their employees are most likely going to go digital as we start to see payroll and HR become a bit more digitized, and people actually having an app to log in and do timesheets or request time off. And we're seeing a shift towards employee services. So somebody having a digital record of their employment so that they can plug that into the company rather than the company actually collecting this each time they get a new job. Then you think about their supply chain. So they're going to digitize along with them. Then their banks are digitizing all the time. Like there's a massive race between the banks globally to be the best experience digitally. And then I think about the governments. So governments around the world are digitizing very quickly. And maybe quickly is a broad term, but we see them digitizing lodgement of tax returns or annual returns to the company's office, company's house. And also, like the impact of this means we're going to totally cashless societies. So digital transactions are going to be everywhere. So when you think about then the SME in the middle, like they have to be in a situation where they're not catching up with all of these business partners, and certainly not their customers. So for me, I see that as an opportunity for the accountant or the accounting firm to bring that to them and say, hey, we want to consult with you over how you're going to approach this digitization journey. Because if you don't start it now, you're going to find up that when you're in the middle of that digitization situation, you're going to be the last one. And then it gets really hard to catch up. So getting ready for it, I think, is where the accountant can come in and bring the examples and do the due diligence on the cloud platforms that they're thinking about using. Because as an accountant, you never want to be in a position where suddenly you've got to make a really fast decision over implementing a piece of technology. You want to be in front of that decision. You want to be the person having the time to scope, do the due diligence, do all of the ransomware, cyber security checks on the company that you're thinking about doing business with, rather than the CEO or the executive team saying, we're behind, we need to go faster, and then everybody's under pressure. So that's where I see the biggest opportunity for accountants right now to go and actually, bring that solution to their business.
Yeah,
Thank
yes.
you.
Sorry, Naman.
Yeah.
I mean, just to press on the point Kevin was saying, I think we do see this a lot in the regional market here, Kevin. I mean, there's a lot of education of senior stakeholders required around why digitization is so important to finance and the natural role that finance can play in the organization to sort of help pollinate good practices around digitization. And I think in that education piece with the senior stakeholders, I think it's very important to make sure that it's not seen as a way of finance driving the conversation, but finance saying we can be the value drivers and enable business to either expand, enhance their capabilities, expand their capabilities, or perhaps just improve margins, because we will be able to monitor operations in a better way in a digitized world, right? And then be in the driver's seat, or at least the co-driver's seat. I think that's very important. And sometimes to do those credentializing conversations, you just need to get that sort of external support to go and talk to your senior stakeholders and say, why is this important? Why do we need to move now? And to Kevin's point, move before it's almost obligated on you that you've got to do something in the next couple of months, or it's the end of the road, I guess.
Thank you both. I think I like the points around finance being the pollinator of this digitization and the value driver or enabler. So I like that idea, and how Kevin has highlighted that everybody around us is transitioning, and you don't want to be left behind at the end. So that's quite a fair point, because we see that banks are digitalizing themselves, and we do see other areas of businesses which are converting or becoming more digital. So if we are not doing our bit, or we are not moving with the flow, we'll probably be left behind. So I agree with that sentiment. Here I would sort of push that question from one of the attendees, probably to you, Taha. How are the governments moving with these digitalization initiatives. And because obviously as part of the bigger stakeholders, government is also an active player for digitalization. And I'm pretty sure that UAE does actively do a lot of things, but I think that was a fair question put down by one of the attendees.
Yes, no, I did see that question as well, and it's a very interesting question for the region, because I'm not disclosing a lot in terms of what I probably am aware of, but one of the things that governments in general across the world have access to is a lot of data through basically records that they have to their the luxury of having, right? And there's a lot of use of that data that a government can do in terms of improving its services, improving its services via, let's say, e-channels, which is quite prevalent in the UAE. You can see a lot of e-channels that the government offers to do a number of tasks that you don't have to actually go to the government office anymore. And that's great, but that's just with the customers, right? But you can also use digitization and data analytics to also look at how are you doing, how are you performing those services? Are people finding that as a useful lever, or would people want to try a different way of interaction with the government, etc.? How profitable are you going to be providing the services that you're going to provide in the current way, or do you need to change your strategy of how you interact? So there's a lot of data that can be used, and that's definitely an area that governments are looking into in the region. And the other area that they're looking into is kind of moving into the space around accrual basis of reporting. Now, private companies have been reporting mostly on IFRS, so accrual basis is quite common. But many governments around the world do report on a different basis, and mostly because the accrual basis of reporting with all its nuances wouldn't really fit a government. As an example, like if it's got a lot of land that is available to it, it's not going to fair value that land or put that land at the actual value, because that land has sometimes been inherited ever since they were formed, right? So, but how do they record that land, etc., and what value do they put to that? So there are many nuances in governments that may not apply to corporates. But nowadays, governments are sort of being looked at very differently. And you can see that in the UAE as well, where you would often see government ministers talking about the fact that they need to report certain KPIs and matrices on how they're performing and how various departments within a particular ministry organization is performing in terms of its obligations, right? And in order to do that, they need a better reporting framework. And they are moving to an accrual framework called IPSAS across the region. Many entities are. And it's going to be great, because once they move into that accrual framework, they will be enabled to then use a lot of digital levers to then also analyze that performance for better results in the future, improve their own cost efficiencies, which will enable them to provide services at a much cheaper rate. And we see that as well. Like DIVA, very recently, I think they announced they're going to reduce their surcharge on some services, because they're just making better margins through use of renewable technology, as an example. So enablement of technology at governments is going to benefit the people at the end of the day. So I think it's a great space to watch.
Agreed. Well, in terms of Kevin, do you see that? I mean, because we are talking about governments, and obviously some governments play an active role versus the rest. So do you see that change happening on your side of the world as well?
Yeah, I see it through two lenses. So one, I mentioned a little bit earlier on, is tax services and annual returns to the company's house. It's named differently in each country. So as an example, we look at Australia, New Zealand, the UK have really brought tax digital, and they've created a situation where you can lodge tax returns directly from your cloud accounting system straight through to government. And it's instant lodgement, so you get a date and timestamp. And you can obviously do online signatures. All of the complementary workflow is embedded into the cloud accounting system. So that's been a really interesting thing to see accountants take hold of and say, yeah, this is really great. Like, we don't really want to have a 25-page tax return printed off every time, and we have to bring our client and send it, and they send it back. It's all done online, and the history, the workflow from the tax papers, working papers is all documented. So from an auditor's perspective, it's really clean. The second part that I'm seeing grow very fast in multiple countries is a new, actually it's not new, it's been around for 10 years, called the PayPal network, and I'll pop it into the chat. And it's basically a global network that standardizes document transfer, that's invoices, credit notes, purchase orders, etc. And it's built on a network that's called PayPal, P-E-P-P-O-L. And what that means is for in-country and cross-border trade, you can send an invoice in an instant to that customer, and they will receive it as a draft in their cloud accounting system. So you don't have to wait until somebody sends the email. Somebody else takes the email in, they type all the information into the system. It comes in as a draft ready to be populated. And there's two main reasons for that, is the accuracy and speed of data. So that there's just a data transfer goes through the network. And that means that there's accuracy on both sides, and you can tell straight away if your customers received and read that invoice. But also for the person and the business sending the invoice, getting paid, we're starting to see the payment days drop by sometimes 4 or 5 days on average, because the customer has received the invoice quicker, it's gone into their payment scheduling quicker, maybe you haven't missed the cutoff period, and there's much more cleaner interaction on such an important document. Why are the governments doing this? Well, we know it costs about $14 US to produce an invoice in every company on average. And people say, oh, that doesn't, why does a piece of paper cost that much? It's not the paper, it's the actions. It's somebody printing it, it's somebody checking it, it's somebody actually going and sending it, like all of those minutes, you know, and you extrapolate them out of a business, and it's absolutely huge. And a really good example is Johnson & Johnson, which are a big MNC. They send 11 million invoices every quarter. Now imagine if they can digitize that. That's going to have a huge cost saving for their business, but also it's much better experience for their customers because they're receiving a digital invoice as well. And I think that's where the governments are actually having a lot of influence. So as an example, in Singapore, there's currently a grant available to adopt the invoicing. That's how much weighting the government is putting behind the adoption. They're saying to SMEs, we will give you a grant reward for adopting and using this network. And I think that will be quite a long-term unfolding situation as more and more countries come on board. But in 10 years, that will be the standard. I can't see us actually sending as many paper invoices, which look is great for sustainability and the environment, but it's going to give much more cleaner interactions and digital experiences with customers.
Thank you. I think there are some great points raised by both Taha and yourself, and I love the fact that you told us that an invoice is possibly costing us every invoice is costing us $14. I think that's a good takeaway for all the accountants, because that's all possibly what we do as well. That all of these, if we are possibly digitalizing, that can substantially save cost. And you gave us an example of Johnson & Johnson of raising 11 million invoices. So that's if you multiply that by 14, that's a lot of money there. And I agree with the fact that yes, governments are pushing more and more. And I guess that's if nothing else drives you toward digitalization, I guess the government will definitely do. And how they are pushing all these taxation online is definitely something that we should keep a lookout for. And just following through from these questions, I guess one of the good questions that comes around is, and a lot of participants would be eager to find out and I'll probably throw this one at Taha now, is where do we start? I mean, where should we start that exercise? You know, we've been talking about digitalization, and we already see some of the positive outcomes of governments pushing it, and companies can save money from it. But where do we start, Taha?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one answer to that, Noman, but I would say, I mean, two tracks on this one. I think one of them is obviously existing tech, and one of them is emerging tech. So on the emerging tech side, keep an eye out on what is happening in the finance industry with technologies like blockchain and AI. There are a number of, I don't have to name publications specifically, but if you can Google this to find out a number of publications that track emerging technologies like blockchain and AI, and how they're being, what kind of use cases are they doing in finance, from payment certifications to looking at guessing the classification of various vendors or various type of receivable customers that are probably going to default in the future, etc. So there's a number of use cases that keep coming up, and people share this. And I think it's important to have a look at that, because that's where you want to aspire to be as an organization, and those are technologies that you want to try and bring into your organization. Because again, for the CFO or any finance team member, it's about showing what value you're adding back to the business, right, through the use of tech. So that's on the emerging tech space. I would say on the current tech, I think for me, it all starts with data, to be honest. So understanding data analytics, data predictability, data prescription, data, I would say any kind of data science is kind of the starting point before you move into more advanced technology variants. And the reason I say that is because as finance people, we're often trying to solve a business problem. And a business problem usually either has some data on basis of which you'll make a decision, or it doesn't have data. And so you either be in a data rich or a data poor situation, and you still need to provide a suggestion or a solution back to your stakeholders in the business. And as long as you're able to understand how data interacts, how variables in data interact with each other, you'll be able to analyze that data and provide suggestions and solutions, right? Now, what levers or what enablers you use in technology to help you with that sort of data analysis or data investigations, those are things that you'll have to see from a fit perspective. As Kevin said, what fits your organization as opposed to what is the cheapest one available out there, and what solution should you go for? So in cloud, in premise, or on cloud, or also look at things around what kind of reporting capabilities the solution provides, etc. But at the end of the day, tech is just the enabler. People upskilling is a very big aspect, and it's a fundamental shift. Finance 4.0, right? So I think upskilling wise, I would still reiterate the fact that you got to understand the rationale of what various new tech is using, and the basis of, again, goes back to the question about understanding data and how data interacts.
I like the fact how you distinguished emerging tech and industry tech, and how emerging tech can possibly change things, and how we can utilize the existing within our organization. So thank you for that, Taha. Kevin, if I put this somewhat similar question, but in the lines of, because you sit on the ERP side of things, which areas are moving faster towards digitalization within finance function? So is it the accounts payable? Is it the invoicing that you highlighted? Or there are other areas which are sort of pushed toward digitalization much faster than the others, or it's everything coming all together?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think different businesses adopt it in different ways, but we definitely see the classic, the bank reconciliation, everything to do with invoicing, AR/AP, digitize really quickly. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned earlier, most of the leading cloud accounting platforms connect directly into banks. And, you know, there's a there is a term called open banking, which is really popular in the UK, which means that the banks are now obliged to actually build API facilities so that a customer can connect whatever technology they want to that bank API, and that's still developing. But what that has meant is if you can imagine, like we have, say, some SME clients they could have 4,000 or 5,000 transactions a day in their bank account. It could be an e-commerce store. All of those transactions flow into zero overnight. And then if you're doing a bank reconciliation, that's a real headache. Like it's a lot of administration, but this is where the power of cloud accounting comes in. So the machine learning in our system will recognize those transactions, will recognize any transactions that you've ever had more than twice from any customer, and will suggest where to post them in the general ledger. So it'll become like gamification. You just hit okay, or you can bulk reconcile like thousands of lines of transactions in one go. So we're seeing businesses say, okay, the bookkeeping part of the transaction, that's where there's a lot of time and it's very laborious to get that right. So let's use a machine to really, fix that area and save us time. And then clearly invoicing. So we're seeing, if somebody has sales reps in the field, they want to be able to raise an invoice or a purchase order on their mobile phone, and they can do that with cloud accounting systems and give the invoice straight to the customer in the moment. And that's like, that's really saving days and days. And when you multiply that out across a lot of customers and a lot of sales reps or businesses, there's a huge amount of time saving. Where I'm seeing a big lift in digitization is also around reporting. So consolidated reporting, management reporting, all of certainly in my days when we were trying to pull together management reports on business day 2 or 3 or get financial reports done really quickly, a lot of effort is done collecting the information. But what I've seen is a real shift now to a lot of the effort is spent analyzing and reporting on the information and actually providing really good insights, because the machines are doing the collation and the consolidation efforts. So there's some really powerful tools that can do, multi-entity, multi-currency consolidations in the cloud that are real time. And like they do all the intercompany transactions, everything like that. And that's now, I'm seeing a big shift in that area. There's a lot of accountants obviously looking at that, because it's not really the business owners are seeing it, but as a result of having that information quicker, the accountant is becoming a real driver of conversations, because they have a whole of wealth view across the group, or they have a management report that's one business day old because the transactions have come from the bank account yesterday, they've been reconciled quickly, and we know the current state of play. So that's probably 2 areas. So anything to do with collecting the information and bringing it into the system, totally digitized, and anything to do with then presenting it and bringing the story of that information to life, that's a real key area as well.
Thank you. I think what we have so far covered is the fact why digitalization is important and how finance finance professionals are can be the enabler of digitalization, and how our stakeholders are already transforming into a digital company. So there is no way forward other than the fact that we move ahead with our own digitalization plans there. So that's pretty clear, I think, from both you and Taha. And I think the last point that we discussed about which functions are getting digitalized faster is also a good, gives me a good bridge to my next question. But here I would like to sort of point out that reconciliation, accounts payable, receivables, invoicing. So whoever has these job responsibilities possibly should be looking forward to doing something next, or moving ahead with their skill sets. And that's my sort of next question to you, Taha, now, that as Kevin highlighted, these are possibly the areas where digital will take over. So what are those courses, or what are those steps that you would recommend these our young finance professionals and even the experienced finance professionals? So what do they need to do to do that transformation?
Yeah, so I would say, Noman, I mean, one of them is to do some sort of an entry certification. There are entry certifications available on Udemy, for example. You can do that virtually. There's an ACCA certificate on digital innovation for finance. It does provide a background or basis of understanding how technology is affecting things in finance as of today. And then I think there is a application of whatever you learn in these initial certifications or background certifications of technology in finance. How does this apply to your business? Because to Kevin's point, if you're trying to automate the data flow, that's a different aspect in your organization if that's an issue. But if you're trying to automate process, which is like automation of invoicing or accounts payable as an example, that's an automation of process. So it's trying to do a lean process, but at the same time, remove manual tasks. So it kind of then your learning journey depends on what your role in the organization is and bringing the change to your organization. And often I think everyone's very, let's say, wary of bringing change to the organization because they kind of have a job security linked to this, that if I bring in a robot to do what I could do, then my job's probably not there. But I would kind of just second back to Kevin's point of everyone's changing. You're probably the change will come to you before you bring the change. So you might as well bring the change, be experienced in bringing and implementing the change, because what happens then is that you are still a relevant person in the organization who is going to be involved in making sure that the technology works and monitoring that technology, implementing the same use case technology, not in finance, but perhaps in your marketing team or perhaps in your manufacturing or your sales team, for example, because you kind of become the champion because a lot of these technologies work very similarly in terms of doing repeat work, automating data flow. If you get the logic of how it's being implemented, you could have a very different role in the organization as to what you're doing today. So again, champion this. That's my recommendation, and bring the change as opposed to waiting for the change to happen to you, and then all of a sudden you're probably in a fix. Yeah, that's all I would recommend for everyone.
Fair point, Taha, and I definitely second that we need to really be that change agent within our organizations. And honestly, finance function is one of those functions which has a very clear view of what's happening throughout the organization and just not limited to finance, because they see the flow of information coming to them, so they have a much better view of how things operate within the organization, so they can certainly be that change agent within the organization. And thank you for highlighting that digital innovation certificate, and I know that you have done that certificate yourself as well. So I know you recommended everybody who's right now participating in this session, but would you kind of give a little bit of a feel of how this certificate can add value?
Yeah, I mean, I think the certificate is a great starting point. As I said, it helps understand where technology isn't being used in finance today. What are the different kind of applications that are in use around RPA, AI, etc. But it also talks a little bit about demystifying some of the emerging tech in finance and what could be potential use cases around that. Again, it's a great starting point to understand technology, demystify technology as such. But then I think very important is that you could do these, but then the next steps is how do you apply this to your organization, and how do you go for more specialized and advanced learning, and also choose the right levers for technology, like what kind of changes do you want on your ERP? Do you want a new ERP? Do you want something that is more fit to what you need as opposed to what you have? So there are many things that you can take on from that base and build on that as you go along.
I think that's a fair brief on the certificate. Kevin, there is a question regarding because you are, I'm an ambassador of technology and leading an ERP entity, which is now worth $20 billion. I think, do you feel that we need IT qualifications to become data scientists or data analysts? I mean, there's a question that does it really require IT skills, or does it really academic skills related to IT? Do you feel that way?
I think if you ask an IT specialist, they would say that this is not, coding, it's not software development. So it's really enhancing your knowledge around how systems work and systematic processes. And a really popular area that I'm seeing at the moment is like RPA and the robotic process automation. And like there is courses online to do that. And there's quite a lot of questions saying, where can I find the courses? Where should I get started? We're now in an age where information is freely available. You type RPA into YouTube, you're going to find, or into any of the online learning systems like Coursera, Udemy that was mentioned earlier, even LinkedIn, they have a LinkedIn school. You're going to find the skills there. And what I like about it is some of them are quite entry level, so you can go in and actually get a flavor for it before you really commit to doing something a bit longer. But I really think that as accountants, we do need to keep pushing ourselves to learn more and to become more digital ourselves. And, we have, for a long time, we've had CPD. And the reason why CPD has been there is to keep accountants up to speed with what's happening in the world of accounting. Where CPD has gone is that it's generally been used to stay on top of tax and audit updates. And I've looked at the CPD that's available across a lot of the associations, not just ACCA, and it is still very tax and audit heavy and IFRS updates. They might be the ones that will keep you up to date. But what about the ones that are going to take you into the future? They're the digital ones, and maybe you actually need to go and search for them yourself, and find out what exactly you need. And it starts online. Like 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have this information on Google, on YouTube. It was a bit more harder to access and quite expensive, whereas now it's way more affordable and accessible to us. And even myself, I've done some short courses on LinkedIn, really to make sure that I'm staying on top of what's the newer technology trends. And I would say that accountants are not becoming IT specialists. They're getting a deeper understanding for cloud. And that's it. There's quite a difference in that.
Great. So I know I've been keeping both of you, Taha and Kevin, for it's almost an hour now, and I'm pretty sure participants are also getting eager at this moment in time. So probably one more question that, because we were talking about some of these courses, and I like the fact that how Taha said we can use one of the certificates, ACCA certificate, as a base. How, Kevin, you highlighted that CPD should not just be limited to tax and audit, and we should really work towards utilizing that time towards upskilling ourselves in terms of digital. So I like both those points there. And there is a point that was, or there was a question mentioned earlier, and that question was, which tool is good for data analytics and visualization, and how far the accountants should go in terms of learning Python. So some of these names are quite difficult, so I won't put you on the spot. So please choose if you want to address. Kevin, would you like to address this, or Taha, would you like to address this question?
I think Taha probably sees it in practice too. I am not a Python expert.
Yeah, Python is not the snake that we are used to seeing. It is as long, perhaps, to think about. But I think what to your question, Noman, data analytics and visualizations. I mean, I would kind of break it into two, because there is self-service data analytics, self-service visualization softwares available, and Power BI, Tableau, Alteryx. There's a number of them, right? And many of them are available, for complimentary licenses. If you just want to, have a starter go at visualizing some data and seeing how it looks, etc., and getting to know it. But then there is also more powerful ERP-linked analytics and visualization softwares, and this is where it comes into customized reporting. So if you've got a decent-sized organization and you've got a lot of data in your ERP system, and all of that is digitized, and that's the advantage of digitized information, is that you could then manipulate that data to report and visualize that data in many different forms. And data analytics, as Kevin was saying before, doesn't have to be past looking. You've got to look in the future. So you've got to look at predictive and prescriptive technologies. So if you're looking to go for any tool or software to help you with data analytics, or see if that data software can help you predict some future trends, see if it can prescribe future actions, because some of the BI softwares do allow that sort of functionality. So I think it's important that people are investing again in the right tech, because so that they are seeing this as a long-term investment, as opposed to something that is just short-term and easy to implement. Cheaper to implement, as opposed to something that actually works. It's synchronized to their ERP much better, because you don't want to then spend a lot of time spent on digitizing data on the ERP, and then spending time moving that data into another piece of software that doesn't have. In many cases, you can move between softwares very flawlessly. If you can't, then at this time of age, and again the emphasis on saving time, etc. I think you want to be in an environment where you can flawlessly move between systems, you can move data, you can visualize quicker, and you have the capabilities, as I said, prediction, prescriptive technologies, etc. So that's what I would kind of say around visualizations and analytics.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate all the advice and all the comments. That I'm pretty sure this would be really helpful for everybody who's on this call right now. What would be that last piece of advice that you would like to leave our participants? You can choose between 1 to 3, but leave something for, I'll start with Kevin now. Choose 1, 2, 3 advice, and then probably Taha, you'll be left with the difficult part of finding the next 3 advice. Kevin,
I think we're going to end up saying
if you would like to give any advice, just try to be and understand that whatever you tell or whatever you advise Taha, it will make it Taha's points difficult.
Okay, well, I maybe won't do 3, but I think the most important one is invest in yourself. Our industry, our accounting industry, is changing, and we've got to stay on top of it, but it starts with you. If I meet very few accountants who are not busy, but maybe find an hour for yourself in the next month. Find a time in your diary and use that hour to do some investigation on what tools you'd like to learn, and then set a plan. The second piece would be, don't get left behind, and it's linked to number 1, but you also don't want to get left behind in your company, because other people will be thinking about what's next, what's the future. They want to bring solutions to the boss or to the business. The accountant, I think, can actually take more of a driving seat. So that would be my second piece of advice. And actually, I'll add 3. I just said I was thinking of a visualization tool, one that I know of. I'll pop it in the chat, and I don't promote it or anything like that, but I've seen accountants absolutely love this stuff. So I just give a practical example of a tool that we've seen be really popular now. Sorry, Taha, I hope I've given you a chance.
This I think you've mentioned most of the stuff, Kevin. So I would kind of say I'll pick up on one of what Kevin mentioned just about CPD, and I think it's a very interesting point because when you look at audit risk or any other IFRS updates that are being provided as CPD today, just think about where these things are going to change in the future. So as an example, on audit, people are already talking about why do you need the internal audit function to be an in-person function, because as you digitize data, you can have a lot of those checks being done by the system itself, and that negates the need for specific audit functions to perform. Even the external audit function is changing. All the big fours and the big tens are investing into tools that could have an automated audit solution that plugs into the ERP, verifies transaction, looks at various permutations and combinations. So the audit function is changing. So perhaps maybe the focus of your CPD should be on digital, on understanding how the audit function is changing, how the IFRS area is changing because of digital. So are you going to see digital accountants answer IFRS questions as opposed to a person face-to-face? So, it's how your organization will need to change to respond to digital, to respond to Finance 4.0. I think I would just say pay a lot of attention to that, try and understand what this means to your organization. And then, as I said, finally, engage with your senior stakeholders, reach out for any other support externally to educate your senior stakeholders about where finance needs to go, what should be the role of the CFO in the future in your organization, and be the driving force as opposed to be driven. Noman, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. I've been doing some non-digital work and taking down notes. So, but I truly appreciate all the time that you guys have invested, and I think there are some great takeaways right now from this discussion. One, obviously, invest in yourself and don't be left behind. So then Taha talking about that Finance 4.0 and preparing yourself, your organization, and engaging with those stakeholders who can help you with that transition. So I think these are some of the great points and great first steps we can take towards our journey of digitalization. I hope I was able to answer most of your questions that were put out there, and I appreciate everybody taking this time out and having this discussion as we continue with our own digitalization journey. We obviously need some support from others, and I would like to open this. Kevin has obviously put down his LinkedIn profile there. Taha has put down his LinkedIn profile. You know me, and if you don't, I am Noman, and please feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to guide you. I don't have answers for all of your queries, but I'm pretty sure I can leverage into Kevin and Taha, because they are much more smarter than me. So I obviously, as a combined effort, as we all come together as one force or as a connected community, we can help each other and support each other with our own journeys, with these transitions. So last and my very last request coming from Kazi Wakas is if we can all switch on our cameras just for a quick screenshot, just to validate the fact that once we get our CPD certificate, your face is out there. So let us know, Kazi, when you're ready for that screenshot.
Looks good. A lot of videos are popping up. So we have luckily 55 people online.
That's great.
Yeah, great.
And I'm sure we all cannot fit into one screen. So if you
but many of us will. So I'm sure it's going to be a pretty one. It really looks good when the one or the other the windows are popping up. So I will take a few shots. Thank you very much to all of you. And Oman, I believe you have already announced the next session. So if you can just repeat the topic once again, because in the beginning there were a few people online. So what is the topic of the next session?
Thank you for reminding me what podcast now. I have to just go back and check. So thank you again, everyone, for being on this this session. And what we intend to do is obviously continue with our drive to informing, keeping everybody engaged, keeping everybody informed, and making sure that we are bringing topics which are relevant for us and are informative, so that if you go back and say, okay, I've just spent 1 hour of my time, what is my key takeaway? So you should be able to take some of those takeaways from there. Our next topic is how to build resilience and thrive and getting ready for 2021. So this is our topic which we are planning for January 12th is the planned date. Please forgive me if we do have these changes, but keep it in your diaries, and we will come back to you with further details. We also have planned something for 9th of Feb, which is on data analytics. So we are planning these sessions. Feel free to drop Kazi a line, or if you have any specific topic that you would like to address and we haven't thought about, because you know, more people, it's a bigger, with the super connected community. I feel that you know, these advice, we are happy to take all these advice coming from our participants, and we'll definitely engage and address them. So Saha, thank you so much. And Kevin, I appreciate all the effort, and I know it's getting late in the evening for you in Singapore. So enjoy your evening. And Taha, I know you have another half of the day left for work. So good luck with all the work, and thank you everyone for being on this session.
Thank you, Kazi, again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Naman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.